Aloha, beautiful beings, and welcome to another episode of the Yoni Havana podcast, where we explore consciousness, looking into how things work in the universe so we can enjoy life more and become more whole. Today's episode is deep, and it's about how trauma is the root cause of all eating disorders. And my guest, Jillian Acosta, goes deep into how she guides people to heal their inner child wounds and grow out of disordered eating. More on Jillian Acosta. She's a registered dietitian who specializes in functional medicine and the psychology of eating. She's also the owner of the nutrition private practice, The Root Cause Method, where she guides clients towards health and vitality in unconventional ways. Jillian believes many of the chronic illnesses exacerbated by obesity are deeply rooted in trauma. In her practice, she collaborates with physicians who administer ketamine, using this powerful tool as a medicine to help her clients transform their relationship with food, feelings, and self. Uprooting what shapes our relationship with food is essential, in her experience, for reversing and preventing chronic illness, and can lead to true embodiment, fulfillment, and connection. Before we dive into this episode, I'd like to read to you a short testimonial from one of our Men of Integrity retreats, which is a profound 4-day journey towards authentic manhood. Led by Michael Tierno and me, Yoni Havana, these retreats help men embrace integrity, heal past wounds, and build a supportive community. Here's a testimonial. I entered into this process an anxious skeptic. I knew I needed something to help me find myself again. I wanted to feel more normal. I wanted to feel like the man I used to be before the things that happened. I was unaware of how much I was holding on to, burrowing inside myself, trying to be a strong man. Mike and Yoni's methods broke that dam. Everything is clear now. A lot has fallen into place. And I understand now the things I need to do for myself, my family, and friends, and my community, both old and new. The MOY retreat gave me the tools to get up off the floor and begin to live again. I found a happiness I never thought I would feel again. I don't believe I'm an atheist anymore. I can't thank Mike, Yoni, and the MOY support team and the entire community enough. Aho. If the Men of Integrity retreats intrigue you, I encourage you to visit our website, moi.community. And one more thing, if you're on a path of self-discovery and seeking deeper connection, please check out our Rising Awareness sessions, weekly sessions that I co-host with my mentor, Dr. Aubrey Degnan, who are ideal for those feeling stuck in personal growth, navigating inner work alone, seeking connection with like-minded individuals, or curious about enlightenment. Visit our website, arisingawareness.net, to learn more. Now, onto the show. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this eye-opening and soul-nourishing conversation with Jillian Acosta. Aho. Jillian, thank you for coming on to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It's great to see you face to face, at least online. I've heard of your name and about you, I think for the past 2 years or so, from a future friend of ours. Only good things, only great things. And I've seen a little bit about your work, and we had a quick chat, and decided to dive into this conversation. We're walking similar paths, quite different, but have some common themes. And from our conversation, one of the things that most intrigued me, that I've already told a few people, and if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, is that eating disorders have to do with trauma. They all cause of them are trauma. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how does this work? What are we talking about? And yeah, I mean, I'm just fascinated that it will all be related to trauma, if that's really the case.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm most intrigued by, so to start, to diagnose an eating disorder, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's the DSM-5. It's psychiatric, right? And so we know that these conditions that are dangerous and potentially fatal, they're psychiatric, right? And so what's fascinating to me is how the psyche and the body interface. They're inextricable, really, but it's like a condition of the mind, a disturbance of the emotional body, of the psychic body. How it impacts the physical is, it's, as I said, inextricable. And so when we're first diagnosing, or when we're really like beginning to pull back the layers of somebody's diagnosis, somebody's physical manifestation, it makes so much sense to look into like what happened in the past. Why is an individual operating like this? They didn't come out of the womb with a condition like that.
Mm.
And so for me, everything stems from childhood trauma. And what I was going to say is, what's so fascinating is, like, my clients aren't the ones dealing with acute eating disorders. It's actually disordered eating. It's dysfunctional relationships with food. It's emotional relationships with food. It's the people that are carrying excess weight, or the people that feel like they have kind of this out of control nature around food. That's my client, and that's also the masses.
Mm.
That's a lot of people. And yeah, there's so much to unpack in this realm, but eating disorders is a subcategory, and I think so many of us have kind of distorted relationship with food.
So eating disorder is a subcategory of, remind me, what's the top one? What's the top there?
Disordered eating, like a dysfunctional relationship with food. People that
Disordered
use
eating.
food, yeah, that
Mm.
use food in a way that perpetuates disconnection and dissociation from their internal
Mm.
experience.
Mm.
It's a mechanism of attempted emotional regulation, of nervous system regulation. That's my view.
Mm.
And that
S-
directly stems
mm.
from childhood trauma.
When you said dissociation, and from our call, if I'm not mistaken, you use some methodologies, and some of, maybe that's from in the root cause method program, or in other programs you use some medicine that is dissociative to help with bridging some gaps. I'd love for you to touch on that and explain the connections here.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So, people that have a dysfunctional relationship with food or substances or sex or whatever they're reaching outside of themselves for, to try to alter or manipulate their internal state, their emotional landscape. That's a pattern of dissociation. That's a pattern of like, this feels overwhelming. I don't feel resourced to like move through this maybe myself. It's not necessarily conscious, but it's like, kind of I'm going to check out. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to numb myself. I'm going to engage in something that's going to kind of bring me out of my body, my experience in this moment. And so for those people, and that's like lots of people doing lots of different things to achieve the same result, they are dissociating. They're maintaining a level of disconnection or dissociation from their body, from their internal uh, experience. And what I find so fascinating, so many things, but like the medicine that I use in my work is predominantly ketamine. And ketamine, number one, it's legal, and so I'm fully above ground in what I do, but it's a subanesthetic dissociative. But what I found, and this is anecdotal, my personal experience and what I've gathered, from clients, from many, many people I've taken through this work, is that for the people that have lived dissociated, ketamine, even though it's a dissociative, helps to actually put them back in their body. And so all of a sudden, and I have many theories as to why this is, which I can mention in a second, but all of a sudden they're feeling fear and able to just kind of recognize, oh, this is what fear feels like in my body, instead of
Mm.
being taken by the fear, needing to like numb themselves or dissociate from the fear, thus perpetuating the level of dissociation. And so what's so magical about this process is that what I'm really doing, amongst many things, but one of the things I'm really doing is helping people to expand their capacity in real time of being with something uncomfortable in the body, and like staying there with themselves, breathing with fear, exploring fear, learning what fear feels like. Where does the fear live? What is it? What is it? What's the texture? All of these things, and expanding their capacity to just be with something uncomfortable, which really degrades that neural pathway quite frequently, quite honestly. And like, and the just the automatic nature of them realizing there's something scary, or there's something uncomfortable, I need to go I need to check out. I need to
Mm,
dissociate. I need to distract. I can't deal with this. And so we're
mm,
like expanding the capacity in medicine space in the altered state of consciousness when, all the details, all the default mode network is the activity is suppressed and other regions of the brain are now communicating. And so things come online. And so that's like this really beautiful, fertile time where they can realize they have the capacity to stay with something challenging, unlike they did when they were 3 years old, 4 years old,
mm,
when they actually didn't have that capacity cognitively, psychologically, and they had to dissociate, which in many cases saved their lives. That mechanism doesn't just go away unless they were, thoroughly supported. So that pattern of dissociation, because maybe the narrative is like, I can't handle this, that only gets stronger the more we practice it. And so if that pattern gets interrupted from something beautiful like a medicine experience with like a strong therapeutic alliance, like with me or other, professionals, that starts to degrade and their capacity and self-efficacy and all that deliciousness, that starts to anchor.
mm,
And that's really incredible because like really the premise of my work is like I help people create safety within themselves to feel anything, because
mm,
if they can stay with themselves and hold themselves through any feeling, any emotion, then they no longer need anything to numb. And that creates this incredible opportunity for like deep reconnection with self. But also from like a functional medicine perspective, their physiology changes because no longer are they using, abundant amounts of food to suppress challenging emotions. And so biomarkers improve, weight decreases, they're all of a sudden weaning off of medication, like all these secondary positive benefits start to reveal themselves just because they're no longer using food to numb.
it's awesome. How long does it usually take for the average client to find some safety or a baseline of safety within themselves?
So they don't. So my program, this particular program I'm referring to, is called the Garden. This is the only program in my work that I use medicine. It's kind of like my signature program, and they sit with medicine on weeks 5, 7, and 9 of a 13-week container. And so we're really deepening in the month before they even touch medicine, and there's a lot of safety established. And I think one of the most incredible things about working with anyone, like a coach or a therapist or a guide or whatever, is like I'm I don't know, maybe you can relate to this, but like I can see people beyond their story of themselves. And so I'm mirroring to them, I'm reflecting back to them like the bigness that I see, the capacity
Hmm.
that I see, the magic that I see, the beauty that I see. And they are seeing themselves in a clean mirror.
Mm,
And so their sense of self begins to expand because probably they're used to just looking at a lot of dirty mirrors of people maybe in their circle or their sphere that are used to kind of speaking to them as if they're small or they're disempowered or they're whatever the narratives are. And so having that kind of vantage point of this clean mirror and seeing themselves through there and then being held and feeling the safety within the energy that I carry, there's like a softening in and into trust. And then when they first sit with medicine, that's when the trust comes online with themselves.
I love
And
that.
so it's right around like week 5.
Mm,
Yeah, week 5, week 6 in the interim of the medicine where we're really integrating, where they realize like, oh wow, like whatever they came, whatever was revealed in medicine space. One of the other reasons I love ketamine is because it's so gentle. It's
mm,
so gentle and so heart opening, I've found. And so they realize like, oh wow, that may have been challenging or it was unknown territory, but I did it and I can start to trust myself. Like that's usually the feeling that comes online. And I
mm.
mean, so much opens when that's there.
In the garden, are there multiple people that interact with one another in a community, or is it just one on one with you? Curious.
The garden is
Hmm.
one-on-one. The garden is like the deep dive one-on-one. What's cool is that, as a functional dietitian, I'm also analyzing data. So I'm either looking at blood chemistry or stool or urine, whatever they're coming in with in terms of symptom. And I'm creating a unique protocol specific to their physiology, whatever I find in the data that is imbalanced or not optimized. And so I'm supporting the body in the beginning and teaching them how to eat for their body. It's not a diet or a meal plan, but it's really thorough and tailored nutrition education and structure so that they have something to grab onto, like something to follow in terms of structure. But then when they deviate from that, let's say they have a moment of emotional eating, it's like gold for me because it's so full of insight of like what was really going on, what were the triggers, what did you really need, what was moving, what, all the things. And so we're able to use it as absolute gold. And so I tell you that because it's like it's really deep dive one-on-one in terms of the garden, although I've had a lot of requests of like doing community gardens, where it's like maybe a group of 5 or 6 women and it's still the same arc and it's still the same like medicine and holding kind of a virtual ceremony with a few other women, or maybe doing a retreat towards the end or at the very end. Like this is in the works, but right now it's been one-on-one. I also have a program called Wildflower, which is group. It's a women's group. It's 8-week program. Really juicy. There's something incredible. I just co-facilitated a women's retreat last weekend, and there's something so freaking magical when women come together in support of other women and let themselves be seen. And God, it's so good. It's so good.
I love your sense of mission and your vocabulary that you use to describe what you're doing and your interactions with your clients, and it's glowing
Uh,
out of you, and it really is you're fully living your mission. I can, as you said, as somebody who does similar work, and obviously you're, who knows how many layers you've already deconditioned in terms of stories and narratives you're living out of your innermost being. So just want to give you that quick praise
Thank you
before we
for
move on, because
seeing me.
it's penetrating my heart. Yeah, it's so awesome. It's so beautiful. And thank God. Now I use the word God after getting quite a journey from being an
Mhm.
atheist, self-proclaimed atheist at 13, and moving to agnostic, and meeting God, what I like to say, or consciousness, universe, source, whatever
Yeah.
people want to call it. A few years ago, a few things you touched on that I don't want to miss. So, so if they work with you one on one and they have these dirty mirrors, I mean, and they obviously interact with certain people, have certain thought patterns, and habits and familiar environments that bring them those thoughts. How often do they meet with you in those first, say, 4 or 5 weeks to really establish this cleaner, more true view of
Yeah.
themselves? How often do you meet with them, and what else perhaps is being done to help them see themselves for who they are, rather than look again at the dirty mirrors
Yeah.
and re-engage in those patterns? I'm
Yeah,
curious.
beautiful. The cadence is weekly, so we meet for an hour each week for 13 weeks, and then obviously the medicine calls are longer. Those are about 3 hours. So there are 3 3-hour calls and then 10 1-hour calls, and we're meeting weekly for the 3-month program. And you know, like as I said, like when even in platonic relationships or romantic relationships, when someone sees you in an expanded way beyond what you've known yourself to be, it really confronts your smallness. It really
Mm.
confronts the limiting ways in which you have constructed your identity, and not forces, because that sounds aggressive, but it invites you to broaden the ways in which you see yourself. And if someone is treating you with compassion and respect and love and softness, subconsciously there's like some things moving in the background of like, oh my God, I'm worthy of compassion. I'm worthy of this level of respect. I'm worthy of softness. And so many clients, both men and women, come with this like very rigid energy towards the self. It's a byproduct of trauma. I believe that we absorb the ways that we were treated by our caretakers, and that becomes the way we treat ourselves. So if your parents were rigid and impatient and shaming, and that becomes your self narrative, your self talk. There's this imprint of like, oh, that must be what I'm worthy of because that's what I received by these authoritative figures that I love and need and was dependent on. And all of a sudden you encounter someone who has a different energy, who's loving and patient and deeply compassionate, and just reframes the hell out of the bullshit. and
Yeah.
invites people to start to question the rigidity and the self-deprecation. And my angle is deeply compassionate. It's so drenched in compassion because I believe that is the doorway to healing, period. Like that my work is a byproduct of my own story. And once I learned my story, I was flooded with self-compassion, and all of the decades that I spent suffering and abusing my body with exorbitant amounts of food and forcing and a purge, and in when I was bulimic, like all of that, it made so much sense to me why I was engaging in that once I learned what I had been through. That was just a way that I was like, that's where I was putting my pain. I stopped judging myself for this pattern and started to really understand that it was just a byproduct of pain and trauma. And so, presenting that angle to somebody really strips away the judgment. It strips away the judgment of why they engage in these patterns. It's just like, you're not doing it because there's anything wrong with you. You're doing it because you're carrying pain and you don't know how to move through it. So let's hold you in that and give you the tools to let you move through it so that you can shed all the judgment and the shame and feel the feelings and kind of come back into this loving relationship with the self, because that's what you've always deserved. To me, it's like so bizarre why we punish ourselves for pain. Nobody who carries pain deserves punishment for their pain.
It's interesting. Let's talk about that for a moment. So nobody deserves punishment for their pain, yet people keep punishing themselves for pain. What do you think is happening?
I don't think they view their patterns as a byproduct of pain. I believe they view their patterns as something that's wrong with them. Why can't I stop eating? Why can't I stop? Why can't I put the bottle down? What's wrong with me?
Mhm.
Nothing. You're just fucking hurting.
So they're you.
And you don't have the tools.
So they're used to shaming. So one might be shaming themselves and then punishing themselves for their behaviors, and kind of stuck into coping, getting some dopamine, shaming, stuck until somebody sees them beyond their patterns, let's say. I I'm sorry, but I want to get a bit more clarity for me myself as I work with a bunch of clients to hear if you have practices and exercises perhaps you give your clients. So you talk to them once a week, this first few weeks. I've worked with a bunch of clients by now. Some people, and I'm still figuring this out, they come very motivated. Maybe they come from a ketamine clinic, they work with me in integration, they work with different medicine, they work with no medicine. And there's a few, I would say, that drop off at some extent. Their motivation really gets much lower. I give them a bunch of tools, they seem to be doing well, and then something drops off. And I wonder if there's some things that you assign people or check in with them, and I do all kinds of check-ins. But there's some people that kind of give up on themselves to some extent, or not necessarily give up on themselves, but they really slow down the momentum. And I love momentum because I think, and I tell people about momentum. Momentum is huge. You're on the wave, keep riding the wave. We're gonna get to the second wave. We're gonna get into a bigger wave. That peace, contentment, love, kindness, those states are coming. You gotta keep going. This is the time to do it while you're feeling a little bit better. This is me asking for my practice, and also for people who are listening to hear, am I talking to Jillian for an hour a week and I'm good to go? I mean, and then I get to week 5 and it's all, rainbows and flowers. So I'm curious.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I really appreciate it. I think that, and this is kind of can be prickly for people to consider, but I think trauma, wow, it just provides so many gifts. Honestly, it just, when you can wade through the difficulty and kind of navigate through those spaces, like what comes at the bottom of the bucket is just such profound gifts. And one of mine is, like, I'm very intuitive, energetically attuned, and very perceptive to subtleties in people's energy. It saved my life when I was a child, honestly, to be able to read someone in a split second and know if I was in danger or not. And so I use those gifts every day in my work. And what I notice is that when someone comes to the call and they're experiencing some resistance, for example, their motivation maybe starts to decline, whatever. What I've learned in my own practice and working with many others is that we use all of it as like compost for growth. And so if someone comes to the call and they're resistant or they are experiencing contraction or fear, like we use that because that's just this kind of like protective thing that comes online. But on the other side of that is like a big expansion. And so my work is sometimes conceptual. We talk about things, we go into like some theories or whatever, but it's deeply experiential. And so in real time, in almost every session, I am inviting a client to close their eyes and to take a deep breath into their belly and to maybe notice where the resistance lies. Like, where is it? What does it feel like? And then I'll bring them into like parts work and invite them to like dialogue with this resistance. And always, like 10 out of 10, there's something that resistance has for them. Maybe that's something that they want them to know, or a memory or an emotional release or whatever. And so they learn to not obey resistance. They learn to not obey fear or guardedness or shutdown, and instead to use it as like the doorway to like deeper and deeper depths of expansion. And that's like I call it like I'm working with the emergent field. I'm working with like whatever is alive. I have an arc in both of my programs, but as like, in this like really kind of beautiful masculine feminine balance, I have structure and flow. So there's an arc, but it's a loose arc, and whatever is alive, whatever is they're moving through or presents itself in our conversation, that's my teaching point. That's what we're working with, because in my mind, I trust spirit to like present whatever really wants to be explored. Yeah. I just work with what's alive.
I totally get that. And I work with my 85-year-old mentor. We host weekly sessions. They're called the Rising Awareness Sessions. And it's all about coming to the here and now and tapping into the deeper inner wisdom. And as you're saying, it's cultivating awareness and cultivating awareness for healing first, and then opening, and then there's a level of awakening. That's how she describes these levels of really of growth in I guess in this earth as a soul being. Yeah. So 10 out of 10 people are, I'm curious, right? I'm curious. They're able and they're willing to have this conversation, to tap in, look into these fears, and just during a session, have a conversation with the resistance, bring something from the subconscious to the conscious, give it a voice, have a conversation with it, and then increase their awareness. That happens. I'm yeah, curious. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many different kind of modalities and stuff, but like, one of my favorite questions to ask is like, once they're in their body and connecting to a particular emotion or feeling, I often ask like, what sound does this feeling make? Or like what sound, what noise is connected to this feeling? And so I'm teaching them to like tune into the subtleties of the energy that they're experiencing in their body and like express it. Obviously opening the mouth and the throat chakra like is connected to the root and the sacral, and really just like opening and connecting, feeling, and sounding and emotion and charge, and giving them an opportunity for expression, and getting all that fear of making weird sounds. Like, it's just this kind of multifaceted, multidimensional, I don't know, play, work, all of it that we just explore. And, when I first begin working with a client, and I've learned this the hard way, but in the discovery call that I offer as complimentary kind of consultation, I'm learning about them, but I'm also tuning into like their level of hunger for their own liberation. Like I can only work with the client who wants this for themselves, because that's when I'm received, and I can feel it. I can feel when somebody is receiving my energy, my message, my work, um, because the energy flows like a current, like from me to them, back to me. And it's really incredible and beautiful and kind of cosmic. Like there's this just exchange that's powerful. And like, it's like, I feel like this is a little esoteric, but here we are. I carry codes. I carry codes because this was my journey, and I through my path and with other teachers and supporters on my own journey who have unlocked things, I've unlocked these kind of energetic codes that I carry in my being. And so when I'm working with someone, I am transferring that. I am energetically passing that and opening up things in them for them to recognize that they are their healer. They are their guide. I am a Sherpa of sorts. I have the little light torch and we're walking down the path and sometimes the darkness and I'm illuminating things for them. But what I'm really doing is bringing like reconnecting somebody back to themselves. And why I'm so passionate about this work is because I believe that obesity is not the epidemic. Narcotic abuse or alcoholism or what, those are not epidemics. Like the real epidemic is dissociation and our fear of feeling. It's numbness. And when a human is not embodied, when they don't live in their body because they're numb, when they don't live in their bodies because they are engaging in patterns that maintain a level of dissociation, they don't have access to their fucking magic. They can't feel their intuition. They can't know themselves deeply. They can't feel their own heart and their compassion. They can't express love freely. They cannot receive love freely. There's just this distortion of the human experience that just doesn't have to be. And so bringing somebody back into their body and creating safety within themselves to feel whatever's alive so that they can move through the layers of the distortion and release that to get to truth, man, like nothing lights me up more. Like I'm sweating.
I love that. So you touched on briefly, and you said you have some theories on why ketamine, dissociative medicine, can help somebody who's experiencing a lot of dissociation from their core selves. And I'd love to hear your theories on that.
Yeah. Again, this is not necessarily in the literature, at least I haven't seen it yet, but my experience personally and what I've witnessed is that, as I said, people that have experienced complex trauma or even like little t trauma, like repeatedly, right? Their level of disconnection and dissociation. And that's a byproduct of like the nervous system. That's a byproduct of an overwhelmed nervous system and a psyche that says like, whatever I was experiencing was so overwhelming and so chaotic that I literally need to like check out to survive. And it's genius and it's brilliant and it's in many other animal species, but unfortunately like we don't have the mechanism to like shake it off and like kind of come back to baseline and start grazing on grass again. Like we stay there, we stay with that pattern because it worked, and we find ways to kind of maintain that, whether we dissociate into like daydreaming or food, or as I mentioned, there's many forms. And so what I believe is that when there's a contracted nervous system, when there's a hypervigilant, hypersensitive stress response, if someone were to sit in ayahuasca or a psilocybin ceremony, those medicines are so divine and so incredible. And I am such an advocate and fan. And what I've experienced and what I've seen many people experience is that when that nervous system is in that state of like contraction and fear, and they go to sit with those medicines initially, you have to wade through so much fear and so much contraction in order to get to like the good stuff. Unless you take like maybe a high enough dose and you just blast that stuff out of the water. But like, if people have experienced a lot of complex trauma like myself, sometimes the blasting off is counterproductive because what they really need is a more gentle approach to like create the safety within themselves instead of just more and more force and intensity. I think there's a time and a place, but ketamine inherently is like so gentle. It's so gentle and it's so heart opening that it's still potent. It still induces an altered state of consciousness, all of those magical things. But what I've found is that because I experienced such intense trauma as a child, because this medicine is so gentle, I'm like wide open. And so I can like reach into my subconscious or into my body and like pull out some deep, really challenging stuff and like process it because my nervous system is not like at the mercy of the material I'm exploring. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Absolutely.
And so it's like so productive and like, yeah, catalytic for their expansion and like almost expediting for their evolution. Not that it's all about speed, but like, yeah, it lets them realize like, oh, I'm not the 4-year-old anymore who has to run away from the scary stuff. I can actually, I'm the capable, resourced woman now who can start to process some of these things and diffuse some of this fear energy from my body and realize that like I'm capable of staying with myself in those moments. And I think it's an incredible entry point into the world of psychedelics because once you kind of start to learn how to navigate altered states of consciousness and what maybe surrender feels like or how to bring yourself into that space gently, then now you have some tools to play in more esoteric waters in with other medicines that are so beautiful and such freaking allies.
I fully agree. And people, they see some stuff about ayahuasca and psilocybin, and perhaps sometimes other plants that are more, they're very, strong feminine energy, have a lot of
Yeah.
benefits. But I do agree. And in the
Yes.
clinical sense, from maps and some of the work that I've been introduced to, I'm more familiar with NDMA as the ally in that. Of course, there's huge benefit to ketamine being above ground. There are clinics. There's
Yeah.
places that send right the trochees or lozenges, etc. For people to do it
Yeah.
in the comfort of their home. So I'm curious, how do you work with ketamine with your clients? What's the process?
Exactly like that. Exactly like that. I'll refer them either to a physician in their state or one of these at-home ketamine companies, and they go through the intake process and they have the prescription. And I am not involved in the transaction of that whatsoever. And often they opt for like, a self-guided experience, and then I'll actually be the guide. So I'm not affiliated with any of those companies. I'm kind of doing my own thing, but this is like I just had to kind of get creative. Um, and this is what's been working, and it's kosher. it's it works. And so it's lozenges or rapid dissolving tablets, whatever, and they're in the comfort of their home. And I have a playlist that I send, and it's over a video call that's HIPAA compliant. So I use this platform. It's not Zoom. And so it's all secure and protected in terms of like, privacy and health information. And I treat it as a ceremony. I open the space and I create the energetic protection and call in the support, and I treat it very ceremoniously because it's you're dropping into the sacred. You're touching the sacred, and so there's reverence and there's safety, and I'm bringing them into their bodies, and we're speaking to intention, we're speaking to fear, whatever's alive, and really creating safety in their bodies so that they can easily open and receive and explore. And it's quite beautiful. And then at the end of the experience, we go right into integration because, as you know, there's this beautiful window of neuroplasticity, and so that's really the time to like anchor in. And my one of my gifts, I believe, is like the ability to feel what's there really subtly and like kind of pull on a thread, and the whole ball of yarn unravels. And so we go right into that conversation for about an hour immediately after the medicine experience, and then they're encouraged to journal and to do other integration practices. And they've already established a morning or a daily practice at this point because I'm a real big advocate for daily practice, daily devotion. And so that's really when like I start to witness like the psychological and emotional infrastructure is like remodeled. It's awesome. Ooh, yeah. It's connecting with spirit through. Oh, yeah, I'm happy to share. Can you hear me? Okay. Um, yeah, it's my intention for my 35th year of life, I set it on my birthday, and it's written on a piece of scrap paper sitting on my altar, is devotion to the divine. And I've learned that to honor the divine is to honor myself. As you know, I am divinity. We are all divinity. And so sitting down in a devotional practice to myself every day, to make space to connect with the sacred. For me, that looks like setting an intention and bringing that intention into a breath practice, and really, and like it's breath with sound. So it's like a big inhale and a very audible exhale. And usually the exhale is like very deeply connected to whatever I'm feeling in my body. So if it's like resistance, it's like, what does resistance sound like? Or if it's like pleasure, what does pleasure sound like? Or if it's fear, and so I'm really connecting with like the texture of whatever I'm moving through. And then there's some breath holds, and then it's usually into a meditation. And now that I'm in my body and I've cleared a lot of like the kind of the noise energy, I drop into meditation and then a gratitude practice. And when I do that consistently, my life is magical. It's so magical. When I don't, the noise gets loud, and the what feels like the separation between my body and my soul, my truth and my stories, like there's like a gap. And what I found is, especially from like the body and like me, the soul, when there's a gap, that's what we fill with food or distraction or you name it. That's where, because yeah, that's where we shove it. When we're deeply embodied and we have the access to whatever the body is communicating, both on a physical or emotional, energetic level, that level of attunement, when we're so present, we use that. I use that. So if I'm feeling kind of upset, I'll go into the upset, and that maintains this beautiful connection where I'm now the loving caretaker for myself that I never had but always needed. I needed a nurturing mother and a gentle and loving and safe, cozy mom. I didn't have that, so I found the thing that is most close, which is food, and maybe unhealthy relationships with unavailable and yeah, wounded men. And so I seek those things in those moments of like a trigger activation. And what this path with food has led me into, which is just so divine, is learning how to be that for myself instead of reaching for something in a surrogate form of nurturance like food. I've learned, and it's actually called me forth into becoming a more gentle, loving, caretaking, nurturing woman, mother to myself. And that's magic. That's just divine. And so to cultivate that practice and to nurture that relationship with myself requires, I don't like to say discipline, it's devotion. It's a devotional practice where I dance with the divine.
Is there something, in your opinion, that is not divine?
Literally doesn't exist.
Cool. We're on the same page. Cool. There are so many, it seems you have so many tools and obviously a lot of intuition and perhaps, lifetimes of experience and practice and cultivating the skills that you have and levels of connection to self, source, etc. I'm curious in this lifetime, if you can share, and if that's the case, who are some of your teachers? Where have you gained some of the skills? How did you get into, the medicine space? And then we're kind of going into, I think, the root cause of your story, but I'd like to kind of go into the now. How are you equipped to work with these now? And I think some people may listen to this and they're like, how is Jillian, qualified, quote unquote, to guide me through a medicine ceremony? And they just said there's a ceremonial aspect you have some knowledge perhaps and skills in opening a ceremony. It's beyond holding space. There's some ceremonial aspects, and to me, they were handed down by Peruvian people in the
Mhm.
Andes. So I'd like to hear some of how you arrived here,
Yeah. So,
and you can take it however you'd
I'm
like.
yeah, I'm kind of an unconventional being by
Like
my design.
that's for sure.
I definitely like to I'm a projector in human design, which means that like I have like this bird's eye perspective. I can connect dots like obesity, emotional eating, childhood trauma. The tool to help heal the trauma most efficaciously is psychedelics. That changes body composition. Like I just see threads, you know? And so I'm kind of operating in this like gray territory professionally where I am a licensed dietitian and part of my credentialing was about behavioral modification as it pertains to health. And so I'm like really like that's my angle. Is like I'm doing that but in a deeply spiritual way. So from a scientific and physiological perspective, yeah, there's credentials I can all day long. But from a medicine perspective, or really from a coach perspective, who I hire aren't the people necessarily with the most letters behind their name or the most packed resume or credentials. It's really the people that have walked through the fire that I'm in and come out the other side with codes. It's people that have gone through the journey that I'm on and like come out the other side and are like embodied and wise and are now here on this planet to help other people and guide people through those experiences that are so universal, especially this dance with food. And so that to me is like the strongest I'd say of like why I'm qualified to do what I do. And maybe some people will dismiss that and that's okay. But it's like this has been so deeply my journey that I don't have a PhD, academically, but it's like I have a PhD of this world because I have explored it so intimately and so viscerally since I was 3 years old. It's been my life's work, and there's no angle in this sphere that will surprise me or that I haven't touched myself. Which is probably why I'm able to hold such a safe space and container because there's nothing but compassion and love and possibility that my clients receive from me because I've done it. I know it's possible. Um, and then in terms of medicine, again, unconventional, I was in a marriage that was very deeply misaligned, but also so perfect because it was like a pressure cooker in all the most challenging ways. And I fucking cooked. And I was really struggling with myself, of course, with food, in life, didn't, know why I was suffering so badly. I didn't know my story and until I did. And during that time I was seeking though. I've always been a seeker and was looking for my way out. Like, why am I suffering so badly? I was in this relationship with someone who honestly would tell me all the time, you love to suffer, like shaming me for my suffering, which was very painful, but like, you know, it just lit a fire under my ass of like, there's got to be another way. And I heard a podcast talking about the healing potential of psychedelics, how somebody with an eating disorder sat in an ayahuasca experience and came out in like full remission and maintained that status of remission. And I was just like, holy shit, this is it. Like everything in my body was like, psychedelics are the way out. I don't know what's in there. I'm sure it's going to be scary. I don't know what I'm going to find, but like this has to be the way out. There's something in there. And so I found myself in a couple years later in my first women's circle with sassafras and kanna, which was really beautiful. And then about a year later, I sat for the first time with ayahuasca, and that was really when my story came out, which was really challenging and confronting to my ego. And at that point, I was not resourced. I was still married. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any allies and support. No, nothing. And so I just basically put that kind of knowing or what I had just learned in a box. And I'm happy to share. Like what was revealed to me was that I was molested between the ages of 3 and 5 years old, with no recollection whatsoever. But just knowing the history of like dissociation and self-punishment and self-hatred and loathing and abuse and absolute incapacity, like, to feel. I was just numb. And that comes with pain. You can't just maintain a level of numbness. You're also deeply in pain and disconnected and lonely. And that was my experience. And because I was so unsupported, I was just like, I can't deal with this right now. I don't know what the hell that was. That was weird. I wasn't being re-traumatized in the ceremony. I wasn't having to like relive really uncomfortable uh, events or experiences. It was just kind of like this showing me of what I had been through, and put it in a box, and ended up getting divorced and launching my business in the same month, which was wild and wild. And when I started to wobble with food, meaning I started to crave and kind of emotionally have that charge again around food, that at this point in my journey, thank God, I was aware enough to know that there was something that was off. There was something I was having difficulty feeling. And so tuning in, I felt again a call to sit with the medicine. And that particular ceremony was held at this woman's house. And it was a combination of ayahuasca and psilocybin in chocolate form. It was psilohuasca, chocolate. And in my experience, the ayahuasca in that medicine activated everything that was in my system from 8 months before. And I had a full blown ayahuasca experience in the back room of this woman's house. And it was this time very distorting and very fragmenting and uncomfortable, and confirmation of everything that I suspected but couldn't process. And I was very fragmented. And there was a man there who came towards the end of the ceremony, who I describe him as like, I call him Japanese Harry Potter because he's Japanese and Peruvian, and he is an absolute wizard and alien, not of this world, in this world, but not of it. And um, he, after the ceremony, approached me, and they were like, this person is here. He's very powerful. He can probably help you. Like, are you open to it? And I just probably made like a sound of yes. And I couldn't speak. It was like gnarly. I was laying down on my stomach on the grass, and for hours, like everybody had left. And he puts his hand on my back and projectile vomits. There was so much fear in my body. There was so much energy in my body that it moved through me into him, out of his mouth. And he proceeded to help me, support me energetically for like 3 or 4 hours that night. And then for the next 4 months. And during that 4 month period, we were basically living together. This was like mentor mentee dynamic, spiritual teacher student dynamic. And I was doing medicine frequently, like every 4 days for about 3.5 months. And it was this most magical spiritual, like I call it like a cosmic car wash of my soul. Like, we would sit, I was in Ecuador with him for a month. He came back to Miami, and we would sit on the balcony, and he would teach me about energy and clearing and moving energy out of my body, and different frequencies and higher frequencies of love and gratitude, and how that is ultimately what moves things through and transmutes things. It was just such a profound experience that I wasn't indoctrinated into like a tribe or gifted the wisdom of serving medicine, which is why I don't. I believe, I need to be invited to serve medicine in that capacity. I will never serve if I'm not invited by the spirit of the plant themselves. So ketamine is kind of this modern day, different, still deeply connecting to spirit and the higher intelligence, but doesn't actually have a spirit itself. And so I'm kind of existing in that. And if I ever get invited and initiated into serving in a different capacity, I know I would say yes, but I haven't. And so this is what this is how I serve now. And so much of what I learned came from this person. And so much of what I practice myself comes from the codes I received from this person, who literally was just like unlocking on for 4 months. It was incredible. And I've had other coaches. I just started working with just a force of nature woman for the first time, this female teacher. I've only learned from men in that capacity prior. And now I'm getting deep into like womb work and sacred sexuality and sacred rage and all the yummy, feminine, dark without being dark being divine, dark being creative, womb space, potentiality dark, but like juicy, coming back into my body, reconnecting with my sexuality as a force of fucking nature, power, to create, to heal, to love, to create. And it's magical.
What a journey. That's, the amount of suffering you've had, also you've had at least an equal amount of magic and amazing opportunities, as you're saying, to interact with galactic beings and be mentored directly by at least one of them, it sounds like. And I wanted, when I asked the question about qualifications, I've been walking a similar path. Yes, my direct mentor is a PhD, and she got it years ago. And for a couple of years, or maybe more, I was toying with the idea. I looked at different programs to get my own PhD or doctorate of something, because to a certain generation and to a certain demographic, when they hear Dr. Yoni, they're like, okay, let's go. Even if it's a chiropractor, right? Or if it's a physical therapist, or if whatever they might be. And I looked at these programs, and I remembered that while I attended University of Miami, I'm like, this is the last school I'm ever going to. I was joking with them, and not joking with the School of Business there, that what they're teaching me is pretty old school. And I graduated, I don't know, about 15 years ago. And I can get, and now even more so, I can get way more knowledge and dead knowledge from the internet, and this is outdated. And I want to say at the same breath that when people get educated, and that's not something bad, but they are the PhD, they have the psychology, etc. degrees. It brings them into a certain framework, and a lot of times they think that the answers are the answers they've been taught, and it creates a narrow perspective. Same thing that I do for the podcast that we're doing today. Rather than having a plan, research a bunch of your work, we had a conversation. I checked out some of your work on Instagram. I try not to create any walls on the experience that we're going to have, and and I'm going to call it the divine, but let spirit guide us more than the mind. I do think that's in a more expansive force of nature, as you call it. There's more flow into it. And so I want to praise you there for, as you're saying, walking your path in that with the confidence that you walk this path, and for that reason you can help others walk this path. This is how you embody these codes, and you've done a lot of work to get to this point. And similarly, when people come to me, I have my holistic lifestyle coaching from the Czech Institute, and I've been to a few programs, but really I limited my amount of programs, and I work directly with my mentor, who has worked with a lot of teachers. And then I walk my own path. I set with medicine quite a bit. I serve medicine in certain counties and places that have the legal structures for them. I created a church in the United States to be able to operate more, more kosherly. And so, yes, I mean, and I actually, when medicine invited me to serve it, at first I'm like, no, I don't want to be doing this. I'm a young father. I have very young kids. Doesn't sound like a good dealio here. And then eventually, when I start with medicine again, it's like, give me a little kick in the ass. It's like, we got you. Just be smart about it. Work within the framework that makes more sense. And so, I want to really make that point to anybody who's listening right now, that sometimes it makes a lot of sense to work with somebody that has a bunch of training in a certain field, and sometimes you can just feel from your heart like that's that person that I want to be working with. This is resonating with what they're saying, and they're already hearing a bunch of what you call them codes. And I'll actually take a moment, and you said the word codes a bunch of times, but how do you define codes? How do you explain codes in layman terms to people who are listening right now?
Oh, I love this. For me, what comes through, it's a frequency. Like I embody this frequency that I can share. So let's just say, like, such a teacher in my journey has been compassion, the energetic of compassion, and how it unlocks, which is kind of like a code, it unlocks like judgment, shame, constriction, whatever. And because I carry that code of compassion, that texture, that frequency of compassion, I'm able to share it such that who I'm working with can now receive this frequency, this code, and begin to work with it within their own being, can begin to engage in practices to cultivate this sense of compassion, to see themselves through this lens of compassion, thus dissolving the structures of judgment and all these other things. So they now hold the code of compassion, or these codes, this wisdom I've gathered. One of the things I realized when I was so I learned this story. I worked with this teacher, and then I went into solitude for 2 years. And it was like that time was me crawling into a chrysalis, decomposing myself into goo, and then like reemerging with wings, honestly. And in that decomposition phase, it was like the death of the parts of me I had decided about myself as a result of trauma, that I was disgusting, that I was shameful, that I was unworthy, that I was an object, that I was pathetic, that I was just like all of these just so painful narratives. I was dying from feeling them. As I felt them, they died. And as they shed, what emerged was deep wisdom and the truest version of myself I had ever known. And I started to like receive this wisdom and receive this knowing and this nudge that this wisdom isn't just for me, that I had to go through that to gather and harvest this wisdom so that I could help people find their way out of the dark too. And in this process, my wings started to fill out. I started to see myself as wise and loving and worthy and capable and not afraid of the dark. In fact, darkness is where the roots grow. Like it's where all of this like mineral rich soil, compost, shit that births and creates and is like the raw material for whatever blossoms, like that's where it resides. And so if I can help guide people into their own darkness, pain, in a way that makes them feel safe, then that's where we can uproot the weeds of the limiting beliefs and the things that have been ostracized to the shadows of their own psyche, bring them into the light, and then like let everything that's untrue fucking fall. And in that they meet. They both create and meet and remember who they really are.
So beautiful.
It's so good.
I think you said at some point, go ahead.
My
You
computer
need a
is
charger?
telling me, yelling at me, and
Cool.
I got it. We're good. Whew.
I think a moment ago, you said something about you felt those more dark stories, feelings, and then that's when they died. There's a process of transmuting darkness into light, and I think that's what you're describing. For people who may experience some of that and are, they're kind of trying to like, I don't want to spend time in shame, guilt, fear, etc. What's your take, and what is going on in here? So what are you saying? The more we let it express, that's when it can leave. What's your take?
Yeah. If we meet a denser emotion or energy with the objective of trying to make it go away, we're meeting it with resistance and it just gets stronger. But if we go in with the energetic of curiosity, which one of my favorite energies ever, to explore, like, what does shame feel like in my body? What do I feel like in my body while I hold shame? Where does shame live? And then just almost being able to just like open, when you're in an ayahuasca experience and you just want to like roly poly yourself into a ball and then the energy gets all constricted and it doesn't move anywhere. It's like, how can we like open up to shame or fear and like breathe with it? This sounds a little maybe intimidating, but it's really like dying into it. It's like letting it move through you. And at the bottom of the bucket, if you can swim fully down there, it transmutes every time. There's a blessing, there's a huge emotional release, usually met with just absolute profound compassion, or compassion for another, or a teaching, or a shift in perspective, or some gift. So many of us are so afraid of feeling. We're so fucking afraid of feeling because the reference point we have of feeling things that are challenging is from when we were like 3 years old. And so, of course, feelings are scary because they were so big and we were so alone in the processing of them that we had no other choice but to dissociate. But we're not 3 anymore. And we're resourced and we're capable and we're supported. And if we invite in a safe container, that's the biggest thing, is I create a safe container, which means that it's contained. You open with intention, I'm going to explore this thing, and then we get to close it. It's like a river with no riverbank is a flood. If you tap into something so intense without boundaries, without a container to support the energy, it can feel chaotic and overwhelming. And people are like, fuck that, I don't want to deal with that. But if you go into a space within a container and invite in the energetic of shame or disgust or uh, horror, whatever you're working with, you can meet yourself and call in support, from source, and move through this thing when you're not alone, when you're deeply supported. And then in that container, there's a transmutation. And there's something magical that happens in that space. And then you close the container and you are left with the gift and the huge emotional release that's now no longer occupying space in your body, or whatever else it's doing in your body. Like we're carrying whatever we're not releasing. But to go in with the idea of like, I got to get rid of it. Like an emotion has to feel safe in order to surface. There has to be safety, which, for me is like divine union. It's like the harmony of the masculine and the feminine energetics. The masculine is the riverbank. The feminine is the river, the flood, if non-contained. And we're so afraid of the feminine because it's the chaotic fucking tornado, where the masculine is the mountain range or the landscape just holding. And it's so beautiful to see so many people are like wanting to reconnect with their divine feminine, the feminine. It's amazing. But if we don't have a safe masculine to hold, then it's absolutely chaotic and overwhelming. And that's why people want to control it, which looks like, I can't feel this. I need cookies. I need to push this down. I can't deal with this right now. Where's my Instagram? It's control. When I was in my kind of worst days with my eating disorder, people would say it's a mechanism of control. You're just trying to have control. And that never resonated with me. I was like, I'm not hyper focused on what I'm eating. In fact, I can't control what I'm eating because I'm eating in excess and then I'm purging, or I'm eating in excess with binge eating disorder. Like there is no control. What do you mean? And what I've come to understand is that it is control, but not externally. It's actually internal control. It's like, I'm not willing to feel this. I'm going to control my emotional experience by totally distracting myself. It is control. And control is a byproduct of an unintegrated masculine energy. Because when the masculine is in the divinity and in his capacity, then it's like the energetic is really like, I've got you. It's actually even like, show me more. Like, I'm not fucking going anywhere. Show me more. It's just like, I see this like mountain range And then this like tornado, fucking crazy feminine kind of comes through. And not to depict the feminine as crazy, but like it's a lot of energy. It's the passion, it's the color, it's the flavor, it's the fury, it's the everything in between is the feminine. And when we, whatever the gender, have both of those parts integrated, we can hold ourselves through everything, give ourselves the full freedom to experience and express everything and not be ruled by whatever we're moving through or whatever kind of dissociative mechanism we adopted to try to prevent, intense emotional experiences.
I love how you're describing it. And my partner in the retreats that we do and the nonprofit, the church, gives a talk about polarized relationships in our men's retreats. And, it talks about containment, which is not control, not at all. One of the examples I like to tell people, it's for the fathers there. Think about a playground. It has the fence. The kids feel free to run wild, and the parents are cool. They're going to have a conversation with another parent. It's closed. The gate is closed. But without it, there's some lack of safety. Does not provide that creativity
Yeah.
for the laughter, for the shenanigans. So it's how I like to think about it. There's a place for us to play. And the tornado, the chaos, however people sometimes talk about the feminine, it's not in a bad way. It's a very creative, unstructured form. Just to some extent, having the conversation we created a container for us to have, let it flow. It's the thoughts, it's the emotions, the expressions.
Exactly.
And I like to talk about that masculine is more.
Yeah. I like the weather pattern thing because it's like the mountain range doesn't move. Whether it's sunshine and rainbows or it's like a lightning storm, like the mountain range still holds. And so the feminine could be the sunshine and the rainbows, it could be the rain cloud, could be the tornado, could be the flock of birds, whatever is moving through the landscape, that is the feminine. We're dynamic, we're cyclical, we're dynamic. And the masculine is static. It's like, I got you. I've got you. I'm not budging. I'm not moving anywhere. And so, yeah, to have that, to cultivate that sense of safety within themselves is the magic, because from that space, whatever is alive, we can then bring into practice and feel so deeply and express so freely and learn from and work with. And it becomes like this, it's very tantric. It's like it becomes what we use for our evolution. We use everything. If there's resistance, if there's fear, if there's eroticism, if there's whatever is alive, it becomes like something that we're just not denying ourselves of any part of our own experience. And we're using it all to know ourselves more deeply, feel ourselves more deeply, and connect more deeply to source.
For sure. I love that. I want to touch on, you said when people embody both qualities, and I think that's the end goal. Sometimes, and this is what we teach in our retreats, it's great when people are in a partnership and one person can embody more of these qualities. And let's say, for a bunch of masculine men that we take through our retreats, which are also kind of a rite of passage, which is missing in a lot of the societies we live in. It's when they can hold that energy, perhaps for their dominantly feminine partner, then they can express themselves, and eventually each person can find more balance within themselves. When you touched on, and if you're willing to share, on the safety or nurturing or motherhood that you did not have as a child and now embodied for yourself, I'm curious um, if you have developed later on a relationship like this with your mom, because you said I kind of became a mother to myself. I'm curious if you're willing to share some of that personal story of the dynamics
Oh,
between you and your
yeah.
mom. There's a lot of, as you may know, mother daughter, um, going to call them issues, quote unquote, and father son. That's the most prevalent that I see.
For sure. Yeah, I think the relationship between mother and daughter is so freaking sacred. And I also think that it's a big pain point in our society. And really it's mother and daughter, but it's the wound against the feminine. If my mother wasn't safe, which she wasn't warm, she wasn't nurturing or loving or gentle or attuned, like I didn't trust her. She wasn't safe. I felt guarded around her. And she is the representation of the feminine to me as a child. And so I didn't trust my own femininity. I didn't trust my own body or my own emotion and my own emotions or intuition. And I mean, the biggest example that you can see in terms of the wound against the feminine, in my opinion, is the planet. Like we're all taking out this wound with the feminine in our patriarchal society all over the place, including planetary. And I think I know that healing our relationship with our feminine, within ourselves, with our mothers, with our sisters in community, that's going to change the world. That's going to change the world, because when a woman is connected to her own femininity in a clean way, she is the only, in my opinion, or maybe the strongest invitation for a man to then begin to trust his own feminine, you know? And not to get too derailed. So to come back to your question, I had a very fragmented relationship with my mother, as for reasons I just described. And this is the work of Kelly McDaniel. She wrote an incredible book called Mother Hunger, which I highly recommend for anyone grappling with this food thing. I weave her work into my work very deeply, because what I've come to understand is that, you know, we're hungering for nurturance and softness and love and gentleness and comfort and all these things in surrogate forms, which is food, because we didn't get that from our mothers. We that there was a hunger, there was a loss, there's a hunger there. And so we reach for the thing that feels most familiar. Food is deeply feminine. It comes from the breast of the mother. It comes from Mother Earth. It creates this like gooey, comforty, yummy, cozy feeling when you're eating it for emotional reasons that stimulate in many ways the feeling of being loved and held and supported in that way. And so recognizing that that's what you're actually doing. You're not eating in excess because you're pathetic or you have no willpower or any of those narratives that have been circulated by society and judgment and shame. None of that is true. What you're actually doing is experiencing pain and seeking soothing and seeking comfort and relief. And so the magic becomes like, how can I learn to give that to myself in ways that make me feel really good and actually meet those needs, not just temporarily satiate the desire to feel that. And so that's really the work. But in terms of my own mom, it's been so amazing because, and I feel very, very fortunate. I know this is not the case for everybody, but my mom was also very devoted to her own healing. We had a really tumultuous relationship into my teens and early 20s, but really my teens were the worst. I went to 3 high schools. I was like pissed off. I was an angry child for all of the reasons that were still unknown to me at the time, but also all the movement and just absolute emotional abandonment. Just I was on my own and it was rough. And she had a fear that she would like lose her relationship with me, is that it wasn't looking good. We weren't destined to be. Yeah, it wasn't looking good. And she started to explore personal development work and kind of led me into personal development work when I was 16 years old, and then therapies and more kind of development stuff. And then we've just been like ping ponging each other's growth and catalyzing each other's expansion. And then when medicine came into my field, I was like, I have 2.5 grams of mushrooms. I don't have any friends. I need you to sit for me. Here's Michael Pollan's book and a YouTube clip, like learn how to be a sitter. And she was like, she knew me enough to know I was going to do this, whether or not she said yes. And so because I didn't really have support, that probably would have been a dangerous situation if she was unwilling to hold me in that way. And, you know, there were other details. Like I ate the mushrooms, nothing happened. It was not a conducive environment. It would have probably been not a good thing. Literally nothing happened to me. I ate, and they were viable mushrooms. Like yeah, at least I think they were. Who knows? Maybe not. But nothing happened. But she read that book, and being like 63 years old, growing up in like the Nixon era, she was told all that propaganda of like having psychedelics will scramble your chromosomes, and she was conditioned in all those ways. And she started reading this literature that was so confronting to her conditioning. And the research was just so irrefutable and so incredible, and all this potential of like, freedom. And she had struggled with her own stuff, plenty of it. And so she started to get curious about psychedelics and has since, explored and has totally reclaimed her power and her life, and is actually becoming a psychedelic integration coach for people her age, because she has totally like changed her own life and is a stand for other people to be able to do the same thing. And it's been such a blessing to witness my mom step into her power as a daughter. And I don't believe that I would have, yeah, I don't believe I would have been able to access the depths of my own process had she been unwilling to explore her role and her own stuff. And it's been so divine, and it's absolutely helped transform my relationship with myself, with the feminine, with food. I would say it's not contingent on that. My relationship with food didn't improve because my mom was willing to take responsibility, or because my mom was willing to walk her own path. It was a really beautiful gift I got, but I was already showing up in a motherly role for myself, um, because I'm not a child anymore, and I didn't want to put my power in the hands of another. I wanted to be able to do that for myself so that no one could ever take that away from me. And so I learned how to soften and how to feel and open, uh despite where she was. It was just a really beautiful bonus.
Wow, your mom sounds really courageous, committed, and cool.
She
What a
is.
blessing. Really cool that you chose one another to walk through this path together. Uh,
Oh yeah.
while we're speaking about mother, there's one more question I have. It's about womb. You said you're doing some womb work, and I've heard about it before. I don't really know what it means. I'd love for you to share about what does it mean,
Mm.
give some insights to me and the audience.
Yeah. I had a really powerful, so one of my favorite combinations of medicine, which I didn't speak about and I don't often, but here we are. I love, and I don't use this in my work just personally, but I love the combination of ketamine and cannabis. Really, really low dose of both. But ketamine, as we know, is a dissociative, and cannabis really puts you in deeply in your body. And so, very low dose of the combination of those two medicines creates this cosmic fucking experience that is just incredible and deeply embodied, but also very extraterrestrial, and it's wild. And I'll share vulnerably. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where I was by myself in this space in front of my altar, and I, for the first time ever, felt the severance of my both my root and my sacral chakra from the rest of my body. I saw like I had been cut in half from sexual abuse at such a young age. From the time I was 3 years old, that had been how energetically, like, energy was not flowing in my body. And it made sense to me in that moment of like how I've lived so unsafe in my body, like how I have not felt safety and like groundedness and root. That's all root chakra, all foundation and stability, and this feeling of disconnection and even numbness in my womb, in my yoni. and and in that ceremony, I saw these two energy centers kind of lit up, and I saw the darkness in between, and then the rest of my energy centers. And I was able to like reconnect the channel energetically, and then like experience this like flow of energy for the first time in my life since I was 3, which was so incredibly beautiful. And then I wept because I got this feeling of like deep reconnection to my womb, like I had never experienced before. And I was talking to it. It was talking to me. I was having a dialogue with my womb, and I was receiving guidance. And it was just so profound, like telling me what things to do to begin to clear and begin to, uh, yeah, opening the channel of communication. Like I was being mothered by my womb. It was so profound. And so working with her, it in meditation spaces, in self pleasure practices, to be able to hear, to listen, really listen to her, to what she is holding, what she has for me, wants me to know, wants me to do, exploring like periods of like intimacy without sex in my partnership right now, because I'm listening to her. And I thank God I have this beautiful man, this partner who um has reverence towards me and my wisdom, and just creates this beautiful space for me to take if I need, and waits for me to welcome him, and it's just so beautiful. And that came from guidance from my womb. And whoa, whoa, it's just so divine. It's like wombs are just these cosmic portals. We literally bring life from other dimensions. Like it's just so powerful. And when a woman is connected to that, I believe like there's not I don't need to dominate a man. I don't desire to dominate a man. I desire to be an equal. And for the first time ever, I'm stepping up into this like equal. I'm not beneath a man. I am just as powerful. It just looks different. And standing in that and helping women find that in themselves is been guided by my own womb. It's like, what? What? It's so cool.
That is incredible. That's mind blowing. Oof. The last experience you described sheds light on the layers of work we can do in deepening our understanding of how this universe works and how we work, and how much intelligence we carry in our bodies, how much intelligence there is to be communicated with between the parts of our psyche and the parts of our emotional bodies, spiritual bodies, physical bodies.
And this is precisely why we have to come back in our bodies.
Mm.
We must be in our bodies to be able to access this divine, fucking ancient intelligence that resides in the body. When we're disembodied, when we're disconnected or fragmented from our bodies, we don't have access to any of that. And that is gold. That is golden.
Mm-hmm.
It's so juicy.
I had a recent conversation in a retreat that I just hosted, July 2024. Is our more recording this conversation. And I just hosted a retreat, and somebody talked about finding levels of truth in the universe based on studies. And I'm thinking to myself, muscle testing, I don't know if you're familiar, right? Just asking the body has access to the database of consciousness. I can get the answer to anything. The more I practice it, the better I get at it. I use dowsing, but it comes from the intelligence of being connected with the body at a certain level of consciousness. So yeah, I mean, it fascinates me, and I'm enjoying just figuring things out. And I see it as our lives in these human forms, our awareness in through these bodies, just solving puzzles and enjoying the journey of doing that, and having enjoying the sensual bodies, the five senses that we have. A lot of people, I totally get it, the sixth sense and third eye, and being able to be the observer and all that. And people ask me questions about it. I think that's all gravy, but we're here having a lot of awareness within our body. There's so much to explore. It's never ending, perhaps. And yeah, I love how you shared so much about how much magic there is to be to be experienced and explored and shared. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the work you're doing on yourself and the work you're sharing with everybody. Huge gratitude and inspiration. Yeah, I mean, you're really blowing my heart and my mind at the same time here. So thank you. Do you host retreats in person? Do you work with people in person now?
I'm definitely feeling the call to do a lot more in-person work. Most all of my work has been virtual until now. As I said in the beginning of the call, like I'm thinking about putting together a very intimate, like communal garden. It's probably what I'll call it, like community garden or something, where it's the full 13-week program of the garden, but there's a retreat either in the middle or maybe 2/3 of the way, and is really what I'm feeling like week 8. there's just so much magic that's undeniable when women come together and are vulnerable and safe, in support of one another and allowing themselves to be seen. And so I'm playing with it. If I get interest, then it's already built, it's not, and I have access to like really sacred land here in Texas and, or elsewhere. And also, but what I'm really wanting to do is like be invited into existing retreats and come in and like drop in and lead live workshops. My zone of genius is not like creating a retreat. I could collaborate in like the flow of it, and that could be really fun, but like all the rest of the stuff and logistics, like I'm not good at that. And so to collaborate and to lead and facilitate conversations or workshops or experiences, I'm such a yes for.
That's beautiful and good to know. And you're putting it out there, not only to
Mhm.
the minds and the ears that are listening to it, but of course, as we said, to spirit. And
Yep.
from interacting with you virtually, and of course, we have interactions in the quantum and all that, and with voice and vision. But there is an energy being emitted, way beyond and from our physical bodies that we've spoken about quite a bit. So I'm seeing the huge potential for deeper and more instantaneous healing and opening and awakening for people to be in your field. So I'm putting it out there
Mm.
for
Thank you. Bless
for the
that.
planet. Yeah, can you just share with our audience where to find you? Where can they find more information about the root cause method, the garden, everything else before we sign off?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. My website is therootcausemethod.com, and there are different pages to explore different offerings, see my story. I always offer complimentary consultations, so people can inquire more about my work that way. And then on Instagram, I'm pretty active now, and it's Jillian Acosta _RD. And a message or whatever, like I would love to hear or answer questions, be a resource, to anyone in any way I can.
Beautiful. Jillian, thank you so much for being and for being here also on my
Thank you.
show. Excited for you and everybody who's listening. Please hit up Jillian and let her know that you want to not only work with her virtually but also in person to fortify this next mission.
I'm
Thank you.
here for it. Thank you, Yoni. It was such a pleasure, honestly. Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for listening. Until the next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope this conversation has supported your journey to wholeness. For full show notes and to explore all my projects, visit yonihavana.com. If you found the show helpful, please leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support helps spread awareness, healing, and awakening to others. Much love and gratitude.